Welcome to World Builders Anonymous. Kick that world building addiction and actually finish that novel with your hosts Vito and John.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay, I'm ready to initiate a podcast protocol whenever is appropriate.
I think I might just let that be the podcast initiation protocol.
Initiating podcasting protocol. Welcome to podcast. Podcast is initialized.
You're like the bad version of, the evil version of British Siri.
British theory?
Yeah, like, oh yeah, you don't do Apple phones, that's right. It's when you set your phone's voice to be British. Except when you have an Apple phone, like a modern person, not a barbarian.
I thought you said theory. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, we're talking together today via phone connection rather than online connection because there was something weird going on with that. So it's a little bit harder to hear each other, but we're going to do our best. We have some good stuff for you guys today. Something related to my writing this week, and then a couple things related to John's experiences this week as well. John, do you want to start with your thing?
Just like progress in general?
Yeah, progress in general, and then I know you wanted to talk about the book you're reading.
Oh, yeah, sure. So, less progress this week than last week, just because I haven't been getting up quite as early, because I've been super crazy tired. That's basically the only reason. Just haven't put as much time into writing. But anyway, still burning my way along. Actually, I finally got around to reformatting my novel in progress, because it was in totally not actual novel format, and I put it in novel format, and it added like 50 pages to my document, which has made me very happy. It's like 118 pages now in Word, which makes me feel like I'm an accomplished boy.
What did you change about it?
It wasn't double-spaced, it wasn't indented, and a couple other smaller things, but mostly the double-spacing thing just like added so much length to it.
Yeah, I have no idea. Are books double-spaced? I don't even know.
Yeah, they are.
Okay. It's been a long time since I've read an actual book, not an audiobook.
Yeah. So that's all for the writing side of it, but more than that, I've been reading a book by Chris Wooding called The Ember Blade. I think I mentioned that I was reading it before, but I'm like an hour away from the end of it now, and it's like 30 hours long, so I've put a lot of time into it.
Wow.
But it is very excellent. I'm thinking about doing a book review on the website for it when I'm done and have the time to kind of write it out, because it does so many things right in terms of story that I think it's a really good teaching tool. And it's very unique, too. There's a lot of aspects to it that I really like. We're going to be talking a bit about magic systems today, and I kind of wanted later to bring up the magic system as it's presented in The Ember Blade, because there's some interesting aspects to it that I really enjoy and haven't really seen before. But anyway, I've spent a lot of time listening to it, and after Fate of the Fallen, which is not a bad book per se, but it's not my book, and I didn't particularly enjoy it, and not my deal. But this book is so much better. It is so well written, and the characters are so much better conceived. And if there's one thing Chris Wooding understands well, to me, it's setup and payoff. And it's now that we're in the end of the book, there's so many things that are getting paid off that have been building up for so long, and it's just an excellent book. Highly recommend it. Ember Blade by Chris Wooding. It's really good I have the audiobook, and it's really good. So I definitely recommend that as well. But check it out, and yeah, just a very good book. That's what I've been putting, more of my time into than writing in the last week.
Nice. I mean, that's on our top 10 list for, writers is, reading more books, listening to more books. It's like, food for your creative, process. I don't know. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I would like to get more book reviews on the site. I used to do more of those back when I had like my own little personal blog or whatever it was, and I enjoyed writing those up. Sometimes it's more fun to write them for bad books than good books.
Right.
But it's also good to call attention to some books that aren't as popular maybe as they perhaps should be, because they're really great, and maybe aren't like the magnum opus of the genre or something like that, but are really solid, really great, have a lot of good ideas in them, like that. So I'd be interested in reading that myself now. Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. I am currently sort of re-engrossing myself in the Witcher universe. I read all of the books a while back. At first I played the third game, The Witcher 3, and that was a couple years ago now. And then I read all the books, and I actually realized just recently that I never actually finished the last one. For some reason, I think I already knew how it ended because I'd looked up story arc things from the books whenever I first played the third game, because I wanted to understand at least the broad strokes of the story that happened. So I kind of knew what was coming next at the very end of the last book, and sort of the penultimate event happened, and I guess I was just like, walked away from it because I already knew what was happening.
Right.
But now I'm actually playing the third game again, which I've meant to for a long time because it's so good. And I really loved all the books, and I wanted to get back into that universe and kind of immerse myself in it again. And so I actually went back and watched all the cinematics from the second game, which is really interesting, actually. It actually looks like a really good game. I always kind of thought it was, it's last generation. It probably wasn't that good, just had a good story. But it looks like it's really cool. And the universe is just so rich, and they do such a good job in the games of adapting it. I would argue even better than they did in the recent series, the Witcher series, which I also saw. I don't think you've seen it.
No.
But there actually was done pretty well. The Netflix series is basically the first two books, which are collections of short stories essentially from the main character's past before the main events of the story get going. And they added a bunch of stuff too, and they mishandled a couple things and a couple story arcs and a couple characters, but overall I thought it was a pretty great adaptation for the most part. But anyway, so I've been really immersing myself in that universe again, and it's been really great just to be in something fantastical again, because it's been a while for me since I did that, so that's been really fun.
Getting back to reading has been a big part of my sort of creative renaissance, as it were. Like, really kicking back into writing a lot has had a lot to do with me immersing myself in fantasy worlds again and really just enjoying the process of experiencing it. I think watching The Mandalorian kind of had something to do with that, even though it's not quite the same thing. Just like
totally
getting myself immersed in a fantastical universe again just was like, oh, I do want to get back and experience more of this, because I forgot how much I enjoy it and enjoy having stuff in progress like that.
Yeah, like, so this is what that's like again. Oh, yeah, I remember that. I want to get back into that more, That
exactly.
And yeah, The Mandalorian definitely did that more for me than the new movies did, or anything else really Star Wars related for the last while.
for a while now.
For a while now, yeah. And The Mandalorian is not perfect. And if anything, The Mandalorian for me, gave me a taste of that, and then made me want to do it better than some of the things they do in that show. Because I feel as an overall opinion, I really like it, but there's episodes of that show that are just stupid.
Yeah.
But there's some really good ones too. So anyway, yeah. So been getting back into the creative mindset for sure recently, which has been really great. And I actually did some writing this week as well, I guess, to get back on topic somewhat. And I was thinking a lot about magic systems, and I was thinking about that both related to The Witcher and related to my own story, just because The Witcher is a really interesting example of a very, very soft magic system. We don't really know exactly what people are capable of. It serves more as a tool to get out of situations sometimes, and can kind of seem convenient because there's certain times where, oh, I didn't know that was a power you could even do. That seems like it'd be useful in a lot of situations other than this, but they just pulled it out of nowhere. But it's handled relatively well. It's hard to handle a soft magic system like that. And I've got kind of the opposite. I think I've mentioned before, my magic system is a little bit more reminiscent of something like Avatar, which I also haven't seen very much, and I need to check out because I hear great things about it. Not the movie, the show. But it's elemental based, but it's also, I've added a lot of different things onto that basic structure over the years that I've been thinking about it. At this point, it's kind of this thing where in this world there used to be sort of unbound magic that could be basically used for whatever your imagination could conjure up within the limits of your power and sort of the strength of the field, almost, because it's almost like this, I don't know if you're familiar with quantum theory at all, and I'm not that familiar with it, but basically
okay.
No.
Throw that out of left
That sounds
field.
way more pretentious than it actually is. No, it's like just this sort of field that can be manipulated to interact with our world, essentially. And it's stronger in some places geographically in the world than in others, and some people are more adept at using it than others, of course, and that kind of thing. And so basically, in the old days, it could be used in a million different ways. It was mostly limited by your imagination and how you personally could interact with it. And then at some point, it was just too chaotic. The world was just, getting overwhelmed with these constant, powerful magicians rising up and just conquering everything and all sorts of things. I haven't really thought of the exact events, but at some point, a group of magicians came together and essentially came up with a way to bind magic to certain elements, like fire, water, earth, air, that kind of thing. But it's not strictly that in these days after that, a magician can just use those elements. It's more like the specific powers that used to be available to everyone are now tied to these elements in sometimes kind of weird ways. Like if you're an air mage, you might be able to like read someone's mind, because it's kind of that's almost more the theme of the power rather than the actual literal effect of the power, and not everyone can do it. Like some air mages might be able to do certain things like turn invisible or summon gusts of wind or whatever it is. There's different things they could do. Some can do many things, some can do few things. And again, it's dependent on the strength of the field at any one given place. And so there's a lot of elements that are kind of being shuffled in there. Originally, my story was going to be about the person who's supposed to break the binding or has the potential to or something like that. But I've kind of strayed away from that and kind of kept the magic system from that story and inserted it into this new story. Mm-hmm. So it's not fully formed, but I've put some thought into it. And that was partly the whole impetus for this project was I'm spending way too much time on this thing. I need to just write the story and then adapt the magic system to the story. And I haven't really given that much thought yet, even though I've come up with most of the story at this point. And I'm starting to run into the reality of, I guess, the necessity, moreover, of adapting the magic system now to fit the story that I've come up with, now that it's mostly done, at least in its outline. Like I was thinking of a scene the other day about where sort of the what is it called? Crap. I'm not thinking of it. What's the thing that starts off the conflict, I guess, in the first part of the story?
Your
inciting event.
Oh,
inciting event. Yeah, there you go. I was thinking of the inciting event of the story, basically, where one character is being hunted by these certain people and has to be saved by another character, and they use magic to do it. They basically jump off a ship, and one of them is a water shaper, I guess. And I had to figure out, wait a minute, if he's going to shape a bubble of air around their heads, I want them to sink down to the bottom. But if there's a bubble of air, could they possibly sink down to the bottom? How would they do that? The bubble would want to stay up, and unless he's actually like pushing them down with like a constant stream of water, that's more power than I really wanted them to have. And I was running into this problem of where I'd written myself into a corner almost, because the power I thought I wanted now actually didn't make sense, and I had to sort of decide whether I wanted to stay there and figure that problem out, or just say, nah, I'm just going to make it the way I wanted to do it. They're going to sink down to the bottom and escape, and then figure it out later. Or should I figure out this technicality now? And I couldn't really figure it out. It kind of paralyzed me for a while. And I don't know if you've run into any situations like that in your story yet, but it was one of those moments where it was like, well, the whole point of what we're doing right now is not to stick around and just, nitpick the little intricacies of what the magic system can do. Just get your characters out of the situation they need to get out of and then figure out a way later. Or is that just a cop-out, and should I figure this out now,
Yeah, I haven't come across a situation with that specifically to magic yet, mostly because magic has a very minor role in my story so far, and I don't even understand my magic system yet. And so that saves me a lot from having to think about this stuff too much, because I don't even really know what the limits or bounds of my magic system is, or who all can do it and how does it all work. I just kind of have said, I'll figure that out later, and then kept going. I do this though with characters' motivations and decision making, specifically with Soul. Anyone who's not familiar with my story, which is probably everyone. Soul is a torturer, and he is an unwilling torturer. Essentially, he's been coerced into service as a torturer because he's really good at it, but he doesn't want to do it. But he's been forced to essentially by the powers that be, and they've kidnapped his father on as insurance to make sure Soul keeps doing his job. And I keep thinking, like, Soul hates what he does every day, and he's been doing it for years. Has he really not even, like, made a serious attempt at getting out of the situation? Like, I've thought several times, like, do I need to go back and make his experience more realistic? Because I think that he probably would have done something by now to try and get out. Or is he just given up all hope? Like, what's his attitude towards this whole thing? And I eventually said, it doesn't matter. None of that matters right now. I just need to write the story as it is, and I can go back and kind of make everything work properly in a logical sense later. I just need to get the story out. And so my default answer to almost every circumstance like that. Like, if you'd asked me that question, like, should I make the bubblehead thing work, or do I just move on and make it work later? I would, in like almost every single case, say, just give them the bubbles in their heads and make them sink to the bottom, and you'll figure out how to explain it or change it to work later. Because if it's what you want to happen, you can make it happen, and you're going to figure it out. You don't need to figure it out right now.
Right. It's one of those cases where you have a broad stroke on the canvas. Like, you could title that stroke, "They Get Away," or something like that.
Right.
We don't exactly know how they get away, but I have a general idea, and it's good enough for now, and I have this other piece of the puzzle I need to get to over here. Rather than giving that stroke more detail around it and making it all pretty for now, when I could very well just scrap that whole sequence later on and say, that's actually not how I wanted to expose this potential power, or that's not how I wanted to introduce this character, or I wanted to tweak it a little bit in another way that totally invalidates that anyway. And we're just painting in broad strokes here. That's what I was doing. I was outlining. I wasn't in the scene or anything. So yeah that's probably the right move in most of those situations.
Yeah, it just saves you from so much overthinking. And I tweeted the other day, like, the idea of revision sounds like some kind of utopian fantasy to me right now. Like, the idea of actually going back and fixing all this stuff sounds like the best thing in the world, and I can't wait to get there. And I know when I get there, it's going to be a long and tedious process, but I don't even care right now, because I'm so ready to just go back and start revising, but I'm not letting myself until I finish the writing, because I know that I'm never going to finish if I try to start editing in progress.
Heck, I'm at the point where even the idea of writing sounds great to me, because I've just been plotting for like a few weeks now, off and on. And I'll sometimes like get into a scene and just try it out almost to see how it feels. I'll get into the prose of one of my little flashcards on the program I'm using and try to write a little bit of it just to see how it flows. But for the most part, I'm sticking to the big picture. I have little flashcards for every point in the story, and I'll fill it out instead of actually writing the prose of the story. And that's just kind of what I'm looking forward to getting to at this point, which will kind of be like revision, honestly, at that point, because I'll have the entire outline of the story pretty detailed. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I totally get
I'm
that
getting
as well,
to a point where more of that kind of plotting out is necessary, because every time I finish a chapter, I find myself going, okay, now what's going to happen next, and how do I make it work? And every time I kind of sit back, and I don't make a formal outline, but I usually open up some kind of text document and just kind of sketch it out real quick, and then I have a sort of a skeleton to build upon. But it might be good to kind of do that a few chapters in advance and start kind of like looking ahead more. I'm not sure, though. I don't want to spend too much time doing it.
Yeah, I know we've gone so back and forth so many times on like discovery writing versus plotting and that kind of stuff. But I was thinking to myself a few weeks ago when I started doing this hardcore, I was like, I've never actually written an entire outline from start to finish and finished it. I've written like a third of an outline and then been like, oh, this isn't working. I'm just going to try discovery writing. Or, oh, that's not working. I'm going to go back to outlining. But I've never actually finished one.
Yeah.
So I thinking to myself, I need to actually finish a start to finish outline of a story and just make myself do that. Focus on one thing at a time and just do it. And then I can figure out a lot of this other stuff. I think just forcing myself to do that is what we're kind of talking about when we're saying just put one foot in front of the other and just do something. It's not do anything. It's do something constructive that's building towards a goal. In this case, finishing the outline rather than just write something. I don't know what, outline. I don't know. Go back and write a scene. I don't know. Add to this thing I did before that I did 2 years ago. That seems kind of cool. Maybe I can figure out a way to incorporate that. Like, no. You do it too many things. Right. Just stick to one thing, finish the story, and then go to the next thing. That's kind of what I'm thinking at this point. At least.
I feel like every third episode we do is like world building, or not world building, like plotting versus discovery writing.
Well, because we're still
We have
figuring it
no
out, I
idea
guess.
like what
Yeah.
I'm really trying to push and stick to the discovery writing, because it was the first thing that's gotten me some progress in my entire, in my whole life of trying to write anything. Discovery writing is the first thing that's like gotten me substantial results. I'm really trying to stick with it. And I'm going to discovery write this novel, but I think that some degree of plotting is becoming more and more necessary as the story gets more complicated.
Yeah, there's always going to be some measure of both, but I think the important thing is just making sure you're putting one piece on top of another one and not building sort of pieces that are sitting next to each other, I guess, because then you're building very wide but not very tall, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. You had something you wanted to say about the magic system in the book you're reading,
Yeah,
too.
I just wanted to talk about it a little bit because it's really, it kind of fascinated me. There's a few aspects to it, and it's funny that I say that because the deities in this book some of the deities in this book are called the aspects. And they are kind of a source of some of the actual magic that happens. It's a very soft magic system. You don't really know what it's capable of, and there are sometimes elements of the kind of, oh, we're in an impossible situation we can't get out of. Oh, hey, how about this person who does magic? You can find a solution, right? And she's like, basically, yeah. There's several situations they get out of at the last minute because the magic person does something that you didn't know they really could do. But it's kind of interesting. The magic is largely manifested through like these potions, so to speak, that one of the characters makes. These sort of mixtures and herbs and all this kind of stuff. It's very much based in that sort of idea, but there's an element of magic that gets added to it because she like takes this specific potion that she makes and it like partially merges her with like the shadow world, they call it, and she's able to like manifest change in the real world from there. And so she adds this element of like chaos and like real magic to the potions that she makes, and it gives them the properties that she actually wants them to have. And it's really interesting the way the author kind of built all of that together. What I really like, though, is that these potions she takes are like actual poison. No matter what their effect is, they're like poisonous to your body. And to do much of this magic at all, you have to train your body to be able to withstand these poisons and these potions. And so someone who is powerful is often someone who has just had all this training to build up their ability to take more of these potions and sustain what they're doing through that kind of way. And it's really interesting to me. And even though some of the situations they get into are saved by magic at the last minute, I don't mind as much because the way they're solved is interesting, and it comes about in a way that builds upon sort of characters over time. The person doing all the magic is this druidess named Vika, and as she grows throughout the story and you kind of continues to evolve as a character, she does more and more to help save them and contribute. And you feel like it's more or less warranted, even though it's kind of a last-minute save and a Deus Ex magic kind of thing. It still feels justified and valid, and I don't mind it. And it's not something I go like, that seems like he could have done that better. I never catch myself feeling that way. So it's a really interesting magic system. And
that's cool. There's a cost to it, which is great.
Yeah.
So many magic systems don't have any real cost to them. Actually, the Force is kind of like that, honestly.
Harry Potter
in Star
as well.
Wars. Yeah, there's no real cost to using magic. It's just kind of something you can do, and you're only limited by your abilities or your strength and your training, which is great, too. It can work as well. But I really do like when there's some sort of like tangible, like visceral cost to using magic.
And like,
actually, the Witcher is somewhat similar, not for like the sorceresses, but for the Witchers themselves. They basically their whole shtick is that they're mutant humans. Essentially, they've taken this concoction of herbs and stuff that mutates them and gives them these supernatural abilities, mostly just like speed and reflexes and strength and that kind of thing. Enhances them a little bit, but it also because of their enhanced abilities, they can withstand these potions that they can take afterwards as well that do different things to them, whether that's like give them enhanced dark vision or whatever it is, depending on the monster they're fighting. So it's very, very poisonous stuff that would kill anyone else and that sometimes harms them a little bit, but they can take it because they're mutated from this other concoction they took. So that's cool. That's something I want to work into my magic system as well. Some sort of cost, like what does it take to use this power, and what does it cost you to use it? So it's not just the sort of like thing I can do at will anytime I want for free.
Yeah, and it helps in certain circumstances too, because often when you have a strong magic system, the question arises a lot of times like, well, why couldn't they just get out of the situation with magic? Because they totally could. Why don't they do that? And when there are certain circumstances where Vika in the Ember Blade probably has something up her bag of tricks that would be able to get them out of a certain situation, but she can't do it because she's already done so much, and it would literally kill her to do something else. So they have to think of something else. Yeah. It's a good out for those situations where you want the characters to succeed by means other than magic.
Totally, yeah, that's important to have limitations. It's sort of a corollary to costs, but yeah, limitations are definitely important. And that's something I've thought about a little bit too this week, because there's something where air mages can basically create airships, because they can, some of them at least can manipulate the density of air, which leads you, of course, to the obvious application of that is to make something a little bit lighter than the air around it to lift into the air. That's kind of cool.
That's cool.
Basically make these balloon airships. And if they can do that, that means they can get around really fast, and there's no reason why they couldn't get to, for example, like an island like the one that I have the characters on. So, oh, wait, that actually need to think about whether that's something I actually want, or how do I get around this problem, because they were supposed to not get there for a while, and I don't know. So it makes you think a little harder about what you're doing, but I think in the end it only adds depth to your world and your magic system.
Yeah, and it's important to remember too that I think that in any magic system there's going to be loopholes and flaws that you don't see, because it's just inevitable when you have this element of so much power and these people who can do these crazy things. There's always something you don't account for. I mean, and Harry Potter is a really good example of that. Like, Harry Potter magic is so overpowered, and it is...
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it's impossible to contain a magic system like the one in Harry Potter, because there's an infinite number of ways anyone could do anything. And so the fact that there's like even a society like is probably unrealistic with that kind of power, just because of the limitless nature of it. But regardless, you have to kind of toss that aside to be able to write a story at all, because you can't paralyze yourself with the idea of making everything perfect and without any flaws, because there's going to be flaws and loopholes that people think of, and that's just the way it is, and it doesn't need to take away.
Harry Potter's a great example of that. Yeah, Harry Potter's a great example of that, because it's so well loved, despite some of those flaws in the magic system, because the characters are so great and because the story's so great because of it. And people are willing to forgive a lot if the characters feel real and fleshed out and satisfying. So that's definitely the more important thing, which is what I was trying to tell myself this week a little bit more. Just to, focus on the characters, focus on the story. Don't get bogged down in this. That's always the temptation. Just keep going. So yeah, it's been therapeutic to talk about it a little bit.
Like we've said, the story and the characters come first before anything else, and it'll all fall into place.
Yeah, and you can figure out those little nitpicky things later. I feel like there was something else I was going to say, but I don't remember what it was. Oh, well. I guess we'll have to wait till next week.
Well, save it for next time.
Yeah. I think that's about it for today.
Yeah, that sounds like a good place to stop. Oh, this car's a little cramped, so we can call it there.
That's right, yeah. Is your crampedness going to prevent you from reading off our list of contact places?
I suppose it shan't. So, everybody, if you like the show and want to kind of learn more about us or read some of my hilarious tweets, which happen maybe once a week and aren't hilarious, you can find us on all the social medias and whatnot at World Builders Anonymous. I think on Twitter we're actually at WBA Podcast, but you can find us as World Builders Anonymous anyway. It doesn't matter. We're on Reddit at WBA_podcast. You can email us with critiques, concerns, anything you want, even like your own stories and that you want us to read, whatever you want. You can email us at wbapodcast@gmail.com. We have a website. It is worldbuildersanonymous.com. You can find articles and just some fun stuff over there. If I write a review for the Ember Blade, which I think I will eventually, it'll be up there as well. And that's really it, I think. That's all the stuff. That's all we got.
Very nice, very nice. Yeah, I'd definitely be interested in a review of that for sure, and I'll have to read it so I can double check on that too.
It's very good.
Anyway, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
This show is sponsored in part by Audible. Visit worldbuildersanonymous.com/audible to check out what the guys are listening to right now and to receive a free audiobook.